What happens when housing authorities ditch paper for powerful automation? Craig Patterson, CEO of Patterson and Associates Consulting, has helped agencies cut waitlist costs by 70%, slash manual data entry by 80%, and connect with residents faster than ever. In this episode, Craig shares how Jotform Enterprise and AI agents are transforming housing from paper pain to powerful performance. Welcome to Momentum, a podcast by Jotform where we talk about the technology, productivity tips, insights, and best practices that help us move forward in business and in life. Let's get started.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Maintaining momentum. Hi, Craig. Welcome to the show. So nice to have you on.
Thanks, Patrick. It's a pleasure to be here and a privilege.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive deep into all things. It was a housing authority and and how you work with all the agencies and all of that fun stuff. And yeah, it's going to be a good talk.
Well, we love what we do. It's a much needed service for the community. And we just feel privileged to be able to assist people with technology in ways that really touch people. So,
yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, always like the when we can feel like we're doing something good out in the world. Anytime Jotform can help a person such as yourself do some good out in the community, it always makes me happy.
Well, thank you. I look forward to helping the discussion, and perhaps any listeners can benefit too. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I like about Jotform. Very, very easy flowing, very community based, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's start at the beginning with let's kind of introduce you. And you have been working in housing authority for a really long time, like since the 80s, right?
Yes. I never thought I would be in this business when I went to college. I went to college to be an engineer, mechanical engineer, computer science guy. And like most of us, I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, found myself in need of housing, and a friend offered me a maintenance position, which had free room and board in the Bay Area. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Then he found out I was an engineer and could do some programming. So back in those days, I started some software programming, and that's what got me into housing authority, management, operations, and software.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite the change from mechanical engineering. Do you mind kind of just walking through how did your career start and what led to you launching your own consulting firm?
Good question. I was living in Richmond, California at an affordable housing complex, and I was performing after hours maintenance just to get a free bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay. So
wow,
you can
that's unheard of
worth.
now. Yeah.
And so one day I was walking by the office, and that's back in the day when we had K-Pro computers and 2 floppy drives on a portable suitcase, if you will. And they were trying to catalog license plates and track parking spots and stickers and things like that. And I said, hey, I can throw that together in DBase too, no problem. And that's when it all began. From there, I started writing software programs for others who were doing repetitive jobs with forms. Back in those days, we had NCR forms, if you can remember those, with carbons in between and everything.
Yeah.
And every time there was a rent change, if there was 300 units, they had to write those 300 times. So I came up with a software program that just put them on an Oki data printer, and boom, life began.
Yeah.
So from there, it started to grow from Patterson Consulting. It was Craig Patterson Consulting. Then when I would go back and work for a housing authority, I worked at the Alameda Housing Authority, and then the Alameda County Housing Authority, then the San Pablo Housing Authority, to Richmond Housing Authority. So it started to grow from there as executive director. And then my wife would take over. And then when the kids started to join, it became Patterson and Associates as we started to accumulate other consultants with the business. And then in 2000, we moved it to San Antonio because it was easier to get around the country.
Kind of centrally located.
Yeah. So from San Francisco, you know what it's like going over the bridge to get to the San Francisco airport to go everywhere in the country. Here, it's pretty centrally located and makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. I would imagine that really helps.
Plus the housing cost.
Yes, there's that too. So you kind of jump around all of the major markets?
Yes. So we started doing consulting for DMG Maximus, which was on the New York Stock Exchange, and we started to grow our own practice along with that. So we've been HUD subcontractors for PricewaterhouseCoopers and other large firms because of our subject matter expertise in housing operations and efficiency. And it started to become, this is an efficiency operation. And then it became digital transformation. And then it became, after it became Y2K. So we've been through all of those transitions and the differences in data management and handling. And we've even watched Jotform kind of grow over its evolution.
Yeah. How long have you been with Jotform?
Well, we started with Jotform, I'd say, before COVID kind of warps time a little bit.
Yeah.
But I would say when it was just forms more so than anything else.
Okay.
I think right after it had a name change. And it was nice because it had, you could pull in little features and things, but it didn't have the breadth that it has now, so to speak. And it didn't have the integrations. So we watched that integration curve because we were DocuSign and Adobe PDF document users. Everybody was using Adobe. And so then Jotform started to enter that picture. And that's when we kept an eye on it because we were always wanting a little bit more. And we loved the way Jotform started to bring those tools to the table for us.
Yeah, you've been there for the whole evolution, really. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Your firm, you serve over 100 clients, is that right?
We have served over 100 clients. I would say we usually have about 8 to 10 that we're currently serving or others that are using some of our solutions in place still. And that ranges from the Virgin Islands all the way to the Hawaiian Islands. We have served overseas for housing authorities because housing authorities are actually worldwide, so to speak. But most of our work is domestic here in the United States.
Gotcha. Yeah. Can you kind of paint a picture of what kind of organizations that you work with and what are the problems that you specifically solve?
Absolutely. Yeah, we serve affordable housing providers. Oftentimes they're funded by the local city, county, or state government, sometimes federal. They get those funds through the Department of Housing and Urban Development in certain cases, or through tax credits, which help to offset the cost of building affordable developments. Because if they don't have as high a tax debt, they can make the rents more affordable. The benefits to doing that are that when people have a place to stay and they are working, these are for working families in many cases, it helps the community, it helps the local economy. And so the challenges with that, and there's statistics that I can send you later, that the need for housing, I mean, you look in the Bay Area and we see the homeless, but it's not just the homeless, which is a big problem, but it's the underhoused. Those who don't have adequate housing, where you've got a couple or a parent and 3 children occupying one room. So we serve clients that try to reach out to those who don't have proper, adequate, and I hate to use the term decent, safe, and sanitary because who would want to stay at a hotel that's just decent, safe, and sanitary, right? Yeah. We want quality, affordable housing for everyone. And keeping track of those people who don't have an address is the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine. Comes with a lot of challenges, but sounds like you're doing amazing work out in the community, fighting for the little guys. I guess kind of jumping to the challenges that you had before Jotform, before you jumped on Jotform Enterprise specifically. What did a typical waitlist update process look like? And maybe just kind of go into what a waitlist looks like.
Sure. Let's say that you have 100 or 1,000 apartments that you have available for rental. People would need to put in an application. That application form, paper document, would need to get entered into some type of computer so that as those units became available, we could reach out and contact you, or housing agency could reach out and contact you. And in former days, the primary way of doing that legally was by mail. But now let's add the fact that you don't have adequate housing, or that you're staying with a friend. And now we send that address update to you and you can't get it, and it can't be forwarded, and it can't be found. So people would fall off the wait list, even though they've been waiting perhaps for years. And so that transition of address has been an issue. The other thing is the cost of a stamp. The cost of postage has gone up even for government agencies. And the reliability of delivery. How many of us don't even look at our mail anymore? I mean, forget email, physical mail. And so you have all of these factors that lead to an acceleration or an emphasis of the challenge with paper-based processes. Then you'd have to send it back. Fill it out, send it back. We'd have to be able to read your handwriting, re-enter that into a computer, which is another time delay. And then find out if you still qualify and run it through the process. Then send you more paperwork to find out what your income is, how many kids there are, whether or not they're citizens of the United States. All of that type of information transmitted by paper and physical. I think you can get an idea of the challenge.
Yeah, sounds like a very frustrating process. We've heard that several times now since we started, talking to people about the paper-based process of just what a nightmare it was, trying to first of all, read it and then putting it into a database of some sort and transferring things over. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging process, especially for, someone like yourself who's been having to deal with that off and on, for 40 years now.
Yeah. And then if you have to contact a bank or a social worker verification and you're sending them paper. So one piece of paper turns into a hydra of all these different papers and paper processes. And so it's more than about saving a few trees.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'm curious if there were any particular incidences or wake-up calls that made you realize that things had to change.
Yes. We were working in the Chicago, Illinois area, and we were tasked as an outside contractor with helping them to do a waitlist update, and there were 100,000 people on the waitlist.
Jeez.
So imagine 100,000 pieces of mail that had to be sent out. It doesn't matter what kind of Pitney Bowes machine you have. And so we were smart, and we used some automation that sends it to a mail house and gets the best possible rate. Well, in 4 days, we had 65,000 returned envelopes, undeliverable. And if you've never seen what 65,000 pieces of mail looks like, and the thought of opening them and hiring temps to open it, or at least scan it, track it, look at it, and say, because now you have to send a second notice to confirm that that one didn't make it. Plus, we're getting replies from people who actually are verifying their income and verifying their location. So that was a wake-up call that you can't do it that way. You can't even get temp staff to do it. You burn people out. So
yeah.
Hope that paints a picture.
Yeah, for sure. So you started, you said that you started kind of transferring over to a digital-based process pretty early on.
Yes.
I'm curious when you first started kind of going the digital path.
2003, 2004 is when we felt like that there were adequate systems that we could start to do that. Where even if we had to send you the letter the first time, you could dial a phone number and we could capture something digitally, or, with a touch tone phone, because digital phones were still, coming of age. Everybody still didn't have one, or a code where you could go and at least just say, yes, it's me. And we didn't have identity theft as big an issue at that time. And so all of these other nuances with technology have added to the need for additional technology to make sure we got the right person.
Mm-hmm. When would you say that Jotform entered the picture?
I would say that Jotform entered the picture 4 years ago.
Okay.
We had been using some tools put together by some other providers, DocuSign,
Okay.
DocuWare, document management, workflow related tools, Nintex. We've tried a number of different tools, and they all have their great features. And what really drew our attention was Jotform's ability to integrate with Zapier and Make,
Okay.
because that was a game changer. Because the speed that we can deploy Jotform relative to the others, the ease of use, made it a great front end for so many other systems. And with its tables and things of that nature that have continued to become more sophisticated, makes Jotform, the first thing we think of is Jotform.
Nice.
How can we get this into Jotform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah. Being the top of mind.
Right.
I was reading through your case study, and I saw that you said that Jotform had cut waitlist handling costs by 70%. Is that
Easy.
true?
Yeah, that's right off the top, easy to prove. For example, if we just send out a notice via mail, let's say we have to do it the snail mail, we send it out, and it has a QR code on that piece of mail, and a person can scan it with their phone, and rather than mailing it back, which requires data entry, they can update the data using that QR code, which is synced to their data file, and instantly we've got the data updated. So we've seen what would be a 2-week to 15-day turnaround time on probably the best person you send it to, who finally gets around to sending it back and it goes through mail. We've seen that go out within 3 days. We've started getting updates into the database so that we knew those people were still there, or we had their updated address, and their address was being updated automatically through automation. So you can see a big savings right there. But wait, it gets better. Suppose we don't have to send the initial email out. Suppose we send it via text message, and the person then responds. So now we've cut the outgoing mail out and the incoming mail out. And those savings start to occur, not just for us, but now in terms of people's anxiety, because they can get a confirmation that their data got received from Jotform. And so I hope that paints a clear picture.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty incredible. I also saw that your manual data, you've been able to cut down entry by, what, 80%?
Yes.
How did you achieve those incredible numbers?
Well, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. And so when you look at, rather than one individual being the bottleneck of all that data input, and now people out in the community who need the housing can express what their needs are directly on a Jotform, and they're keystroking it in on their phone, there's no wait time. Now let's add language differences. Jotform also allows us to communicate multilingual. So even when we're performing surveys of customers at a housing agency, it doesn't matter what their language is. We can put the buttons there for them to select the language they want, which gives them a greater feeling of being understood and appreciated, which is making humans more valuable, which is what we like about Jotform too.
Yeah, that's got to be a bit of a game changer, the language barrier, which, paper-based forms, there was no way you could do that, couldn't even really, I guess you could create more paper-based forms and send those out, but you don't even know specifically who needs them. It's just a whole crazy thing. Could you share any specific examples of a housing authority project where Jotform completely changed the game?
Sure. We had one recently in the New Haven, Connecticut area, and they needed to update their wait list after a number of years of it not being updated. And what would normally take 6 months, we were able to do in 30 days.
Wow.
And just by the format that we just mentioned, we sent out a notice and we could let them know, hey, we need your information back in 30 days. And on that 30th day, those who had communicated back via the Jotform, well, their data was already updated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't have to hire temps, train them, give them user passwords to a new system. And all of that energy went away because Jotform was able to take a painful P, the paperwork, and help it become more powerful by productivity. So,
yeah, that's huge. Yeah. I'm curious now with Jotform how it's really helped you reach people without those permanent mailing addresses and people who may not have an address on file at all.
Excellent point. I would say that the way that happens now is, imagine if you're trying to reach people on your waiting list and you had filled out an application. You know you're on the waiting list, but you've never gotten a notice because you've lived with this relative or then that relative, and mail only gets forwarded so far. Mm-hmm. But you see in the newspaper, or you're visiting the website of the organization, and there's a QR code that if you're on the waiting list, scan this QR code and let us know where you're at and update your application. Boom, that's one way, that QR code. The other way is if you leave and allow the agency to send you an SMS message or a text message or even an email, they can email you a link to the update Jotform update form, and then that accomplishes it also. So what we're also seeing is that people don't listen or read their mail as much anymore, or their email. But their SMS and text messaging, that is the number one way to reach people, especially without an address. And if anybody Googles it, that homeless use, those who are homeless, use of cellular mobile devices, relatives may not always be able to give them a place to stay, but many relatives and some community action programs will give them a cell phone. It's their means of connecting with the planet. Yeah. And so that's why we think that that's going to continue to be a real strong advocate or strong helper to those who are in need of housing.
Yeah, that's kind of a huge step that I didn't even really think about. But pretty much everybody's got a cell phone of some sort nowadays. Yeah. It doesn't have to be fancy. As long as you can get on the web and update your information, you're on the wait list, which is huge. It's really cool to hear. I guess you've talked a little bit about the human cost of the paper-based processes, but how else does that look in real life?
In real life, let's imagine that you need you're a hardworking single parent, and you need that job, and that job is tough. And let's say you're in Chicago. We'll make it middle America, and you have to get your paperwork back to the housing authority by a deadline. It's snowing outside. You've had to drop your kids off to daycare, and now you have to take time off work in order to take paperwork into the housing authority, and then wait in line and wonder what's going to happen. There's a human cost there. There's additional time. Let's say you're elderly. Let's say that it's Arizona, and there's a wait list that opens, and the line's going to be hours. Well, we've seen how people have fainted in lines for voting. Now you've got to stand in line in the heat in order to get an application logged in because you're worried about losing your place. So automation with Jotform helps to challenge those human issues that are real. How long can you stay in line should not be the determining factor on whether or not you qualify for housing. Yeah.
Wow. That really paints a picture. Yeah. One thing you've mentioned, especially in the case study, you mentioned that there's actually unexpected health benefits from going paperless as well. Can you maybe go into that a little bit?
I will. I'll try to make it a little bit humorous because I think when we're laughing, we breathe, and oxygen to the brain means that we're still active and alive. But you remember turning in homework in school back in the days when we turned in paper homework. And if you were a boy, your homework could have been balled up in your pocket. There's no telling. Use your imagination where that piece of paper has been, okay? Now let's take that piece of paper that's been with you and your favorite dog out in the woods and everything else, and it's got a little bit of a Kool-Aid on it or something else, and let's put it on a copy machine. And let's put it on a heat lamp on the copy machine with a blower that circulates air throughout the office. Not only is the copy machine contaminated, the air blowing in the office contaminated, but now those rollers and every other fresh piece of paper that you put into that copy machine becomes a soup combination mix that I'm sure your imagination has solved the issue of what happens to air quality when we keep copying public documents in an office setting.
Wow, that's disgusting. Yeah, now I never want to touch another piece of paper again.
That's right. So one of the ways is you get that piece of paper, scan it as soon as it comes into the agency. If it's paper, there's still going to be paper, right? And hand it back to the individual. And that's why we also do document management. Now that becomes a managed digital document where we can extract data that we can also then verify with Jotform. So it helps to eliminate all those paper files. And here's another one. Imagine all the public agencies that had all this paperwork and a hurricane hits. And the office files get saturated or get destroyed, and now they're circulating in the environment, and people can pick up Social Security numbers and other things. Another human cost of paper on the disaster side. So it amplifies the disaster. Yeah. When we have paper documents.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's those things that you don't really think about when, like if a building catches fire, or if there's a natural disaster, or if there's theft, or any of those kinds of things. Getting everything digital based is kind of huge, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I have a map that shows just how disasters are affecting those types of things across the country, because now not only do you have the homeless who are homeless, but the people who had homes are homeless. So,
yeah, I would imagine like a situation like we just had, last year with the Palisades fire and
exactly
that kind of stuff. There's, beyond the human cost of it, people trying to get onto those same wait lists,
Hey, and how do you do it with paper? Is that really what you want to have confidence in? I mean, I was there during the Oakland Hills fire, and so it happens, and it's happening more prevalent. And so especially those coastal housing agencies, we encourage them to go paperless to the degree possible, because not only that, but their people can work with documents that are digital remotely if they can't get into the office. So it doesn't keep them shut down, as we saw under COVID at times too. So
yeah, I'm sure that was huge during COVID. With everything had to go digital. I'm actually kind of curious what that looked like for you on your side of things. Like, were you mostly digital at that point when COVID hit?
We were mostly digital.
Okay.
As a consultant who used to do more than 50 flights a year, I would buy a laptop so that I could do Zoom meetings or other types of remote meetings for our clients, because why pay an airline and a hotel when all we need to do is talk? And I think that COVID did help to advance and accelerate what we're doing right now, and that is, online collaboration. And for the agencies that didn't go digital, it did jumpstart digital for many of them. But there's still some that are going back, that they're undecided because they've got this huge investment in file cabinets and archives, and the question of what to scan, what not to scan, what to keep is heavily on people's minds. But it is accelerating.
Yeah. We actually started this podcast during COVID as a way to, continue to talk to our users and actually hear their stories. And it's kind of opened up the floodgates as far as, I wouldn't be able to talk to you right now. I'd have to fly out to San Antonio to talk to you. It's pretty great what this kind of like accelerated digital technology has done for the world in general.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it's leading to remote interviews, because we had, jury trials and everything else, and people were all on Zoom. And so now we're doing interviews that way, where people can go into a location and not have to travel to the agency to do a face-to-face. So I think it's helped all of us think differently and in a good way.
Yeah, in definitely a positive way, in my opinion. Switching gears a little bit, I'm really interested to hear how you started incorporating AI agents, which, is still relatively new for us. We launched back in January, our AI agents. You've actually, from reading through your case study, you've developed an AI agent for procurement, technical support, and even more than that. What all did these agents actually do, and how did you start implementing all of that?
Well, everybody's been talking about AI and everybody knows ChatGPT. There's other tools out there that, you say, okay, everybody wants to know what an agent does. So I said, let's see what we can really do. And I did. I created an agent using another tool, Notebook LM. And the key was that it would not hallucinate. I needed something that wouldn't hallucinate. So what I did was I said, okay, act as a tax agent. And here's my taxes for the X number of years and give me some suggestions. And it was amazing what it came up with because it was looking at that information. When Jotform came out with their tool, and similarly, you can train it so that it is not hallucinating. It is relying specifically on agency-based data or enterprise-based data that we feed it. So I started feeding it rules and regulations, policies and procedures for different clients and customers, and then testing it. I actually had one that looked a little like me and used my middle name, and I wanted to see what it came up with and how fast it came up with it. And of course, because it's looking specifically at that information that I trained it with, it came back faster, and it was specifically accurate. And so then that's when we started thinking, you know what, this can be customized and configured, not just for those that have policies and regulations from the federal government, but on the local level. So that as an employee orientation, we can feed it the information and it's going to give a very consistent approach to employee orientation. Or what's the wait list? I have arthritis, I can't write, I don't have a computer, what can I do? Now I can call a Jotform AI agent and give it my waitlist information and phone number and email address. That was amazing. So that's how we got into building those Jotform agents.
So you're actually using the phone side of things on the agent. That's so cool.
Yes.
I haven't actually talked to anybody who's been using that yet. And that's such a cool use case. That's something I never would have thought of when we were first toying around with AI agents, like actually being able to help somebody who may not be able to type or may not be able to, use their hands, I guess. And, in that case of like, an arthritic older person or, yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to those who are up in age, I help a lot of those who suffer from dementia and things of that nature. And if you've ever been through that with a relative, you don't want to correct the person all the time, but you know who the easiest person to correct you is yourself. So I took a voice of a friend of mine with his permission too, and simulated that voice using some online tools. We know that there's 11 labs and other things out there that we can use so that it can remember things for him, like his appointment calendar and schedule, so he can call himself.
Wow.
And ask himself, hey, what's going on today? And it'll come back and tell him, hey, Patrick, it's nice to hear you, so and so, and this is the way it's going to be. This is what's going down. And so I'm experimenting with that to see how, because I think that in the future, every individual will have an agent like we have a mobile device. I think it's just a matter of time.
Wow, that's like a really cool, innovative way of using an agent, helping somebody with dementia. That's something I never would have thought of. That's why I love doing these, just because I never hear, it's always something completely different. It's really cool use cases that I never would have thought of.
We've got another one I don't mind sharing because if somebody gets there before we do, but we know with the Internet of Things, you can have a sensor on we always worry about when you're managing senior properties that we used to have to go from door to door and knock every day to make sure everybody's okay in a unit. And you want to do that in a way that's not intrusive. Relatives want to know that their relatives being well taken care of. And so one of the things that we thought up is if you put a sensor on the front door, no camera, a sensor on the refrigerator to know when it opens and closes, and a sensor on the water valve to know like if the sink's been running or the toilet's been flushing, you start to build a pattern of what that person does day to day, a biorhythm. And to have an AI agent that can go into a Jotform table from those sensors, and then if it gets off a bit at a certain percentage, the person's either not eating, not moving, or not washing up, or haven't left their unit. And that can send an alert. So it's things like that we think show a lot of promise for how technology can really touch people and help alert a relative, hey, you need to check on so-and-so.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's another one that that's amazing. Yeah. What are those sensors, like what kind of sensors are you using? Just like a motion sensor?
It's just a motion sensor or an open close sensor like you put on a window, because all you need to know is whether or not the refrigerator opened or closed.
And is that in practice now?
It's in development and being tested.
Wow.
So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. That's pretty amazing. You better patent that.
We've got some other ideas with the technology that's available, but I don't mind sharing that one because if somebody beats me to it, they're going to be helping more people. And that's what we love to do. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. That's what it's all about. I guess, can you maybe walk me through a real life example of where an AI agent has saved a significant amount of time or resources?
Sure.
Which I guess you kind of already did, but.
That's okay. I mean, there's tons of them out there. Taking a contract, I didn't know we could do this, but we tried it with the Jotform AI agent. We took a contract, and as a contract reviewer, we had established that this agent would be a person who reviews contracts as an assistant legal counsel, so to speak, because of course they haven't been to college and everything, right? And then we asked them to look at the document for things that might put us at risk. And it did. We had a contract one time where embedded in the contract was that we could only do work with 2 of those types of agencies in that state. So if we're already doing work with one and we sign this, technically we're saying we won't compete on any others. And the AI agent found it. Now, how much time would that have taken? How many legal counselors would that have had to go to for us to find it? That's one way. Yeah. Another way that it saved significant amount of resources is in generating responses for maintenance requests. We created a maintenance worker that you could call and get self-assistance with maintenance. So we loaded plans, specifications, blueprints, and some website links on how to do this and how to do that. And so people can call and say, hey, my faucet's leaking. What are the most probable causes? And the website had no problem. The AI agent had no problem. Here's the top 4, because I told it, try to stay to the top 4 because people can't keep up with top 10. That's only on late night TV.
Yeah, these are all amazing examples. Really outside of the box thinking. I love that. That's so cool. How do you integrate Jotform with the tools that you were using before, like DocuSign, Smartsheet, and then like how you're using Zapier to deliver your complete solutions, like these entire wrapped together AI agents?
Good question. The way that we look at all of our clients, all of our customers now, because what we've been doing now and offering is a digital AI readiness assessment, AI and automation readiness assessment. And one of the things we look at is what tools are in the solution stack, the software inventory that company is using, and how do they talk to each other? Because down the road, as we can see, almost every tool from Microsoft Office to accounting products, everything's going to have a built-in AI.
Mm-hmm.
These AIs are going to have to talk to each other. Until they do, they either have a Zapier or a Make.com, an integration as a service type platform that they can communicate with. So Smartsheet, if you're not an API programmer, you can use Make.com to integrate Smartsheet with Jotform.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll take, we had a Smartsheet form in this case at a housing authority in Nevada, and people would come in the lobby and they would type, and we spun this up in 2 days. They could come in the lobby, type in their name and their address and who they wanted to see, and they would go on a waiting board and it would start a clock. And Smartsheet would start to put together a dashboard on who was in the lobby, how long they were in the lobby, and staff were starting to run to try to make sure the bars didn't go, so it made it almost a video game, on customer service. But that was all because of the connections between Jotform, collecting data and forms and attachments. Another way that we've used Jotform is to collect responses from bidders on government contracts. Rather than mailing in a thumb drive with a digital file on it, now you can attach it and sign it and send it in, and the agency gets that date, time stamped, and everything else. And so those are ways we're using Jotform integrated with Zapier and Make.com and Smartsheet and DocuWare. We're using it with DocuWare quite a bit now.
Okay. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, trying to get government as fast as it can possibly be. Always easier said than done. But yeah, figuring out how to make everything talk to each other and the next big evolution is getting all of the AIs to recognize each other and interact together. Whoever comes up with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Multiple personality disorder.
Yeah. I guess just kind of switching gears here. You recently became a Jotform reseller, right?
Yeah.
What opportunities do you see in that role?
Yeah. We don't take lightly. We're not here just to resell anything that can be resold, because that's not really where we make our living. Where we make our living is delivering solutions that people, smart solutions, intelligent solutions that are tied together. And Jotform became one of the mortars for that could act as a go-between between a lot of different products. We have robotic processes that can feed into Jotform, or Jotform can feed into robotic processes. And so when we go to an agency and do a digital assessment, one of the first things is every public agency has forms.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they collect information. That's how you signed here, and that starts a process. So Jotform, with its workflow capabilities, started to become an instrumental part of that, especially if an agency was a smaller agency that didn't have a big budget and couldn't afford some of the other tools. What Jotform has inside of it, we saw for smaller agencies that may not even have an IT staff. They may just have one person who's the IT go-to person. And so as a reseller, sometimes they come to us because they want us to build it for them, since we have all this experience, build it for them, deploy it. And rather than try and maintain it in our own Jotform environment, we said, there's a use case there where they need to have their own so that it's unique to them and there's no worry about data crossing paths with anyone else. And that's why and how we became a Jotform reseller.
Yeah, kind of simplifying the process for them.
Yeah.
Just kind of guiding people in the right direction, which I think is huge, especially, in the business that you're in, kind of making it easy for anybody to kind of adapt and help people the way that you have helped people. That's kind of amazing.
Thank you.
I saw that you're about to present to 150 different housing authorities. How did that come about? And then what's the core message that you want them to take away from your presentation?
There's an organization called the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, NARO. And we've been a member of NARO for decades. And we used to do a lot of presentations, but since COVID, we hadn't done any. And we were invited to give a presentation in Rogers, Arkansas, to Southwest NARO, about 4 or 5 states that were gathered there together. And we did a presentation on AI and IA, intelligent automation. And we gave it at a very grassroots level, and we featured Jotform and a couple of Jotform agents. We had loaded some data and trained a couple on the housing authorities that were there. And so people came up and started talking with it, and we let it call it. And they were so impressed that they recommended that we give this presentation for small housing authorities throughout the United States.
Wow.
Because we felt like Jotform and its agentic capability was one of the easiest to deploy and to train and to turn around rapidly. And so that's how we got into this scenario. We're hoping to be able to help a lot more housing agencies with, we call it some packages that feature Jotform and or Smartsheet DocuWare. It just depends on what the agency needs.
Mm-hmm.
And go from there. And that's how that occurred.
Wow. Yeah, you're kind of like out there as a foot soldier for Jotform, but at the same time, you're actually like, showing people something that can really help them and make their lives easier. I think that's pretty amazing.
I think when people hear the agent talk to them, and picking a voice is very important. It's like, if you always ask who you're talking to and how would you like me to call you by your first name, last name? They're like, no, you can call me this. And it goes, okay, so-and-so. They start to engage.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we're doing that with executives, we say, now imagine an elderly woman who's engaging, and you give it instructions that now if the person starts to repeat and do this and do that, try to accelerate it to, a human intervention or something of that nature. But look at all the additional people that can be helped outside of business hours. So
yeah, for sure. I feel like, there's a little bit of a stigma behind AI in general, especially nowadays, because it's so new and kind of, it's a little bit uncomfortable. But I mean, seeing the way that you're using it really gives me hope for the future of like what AI is possible, capable of doing for people. Especially like the examples that you gave of, elderly or people with dementia, people who have who really need to be able to talk to somebody to give their information over. It's really cool to see. One other question I had, where do you see AI and automation taking government housing work in the next 5 years or so?
I see AI assisting not just the workers inside the housing authority, the staff. In the past few years, the past 25 years or so, the way housing authorities assisted people was, okay, if you're going to be on our waiting list, we're going to help you get a Gmail so that we can get in touch with you by Gmail. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, and this is, I'm pushing it out there because I like to see how close I come to reality. I see that people will get assigned an AI. That wherever you are, you call this AI, and this AI keeps up with your how many people in your family, this and that, and then we'll talk to your AI, and if we need more information, your AI will reach out to you. And then that way, multiple government agencies can talk to an individual facilitated by the AI, and not, it's like an answering machine, so to speak. Hi, Craig's not in right now, but you know what? His wife had a baby on so-and-so. It could go into things like that. I see AI assisting both agencies and institutions and individuals to make better use of the tools, because right now, what do? We have to go to a website, filter down through it, read it and understand it. Couldn't that be facilitated with AI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, asking specific questions.
Yeah.
The AI knowing everybody's specific circumstances and questions that they haven't answered. And yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, that's a great hopeful message for the future with AI.
We pre-fill forms now, and the website may ask you, hey, do you want me to pre-fill your name and address in this? That's an automation, but imagine if you could do that intelligently.
Yeah, for sure. I guess kind of wrapping up here, I wanted to ask you about your, you have a philosophy of the painful P's and the powerful P's.
Yes.
Can you kind of elaborate on that, what that means and what it means to your clients?
Well, Patrick, which is a P, and Craig Patterson, which is a P, it has nothing to do with our names. But when you look at paperwork, policy, procedures, public interest, public demand, all of these are P's that have a buildup of paperwork stuck in processes and procedures that are often not understood. And so then when you have the public trying to meet and an agency trying to get productivity, maintain privacy, there's a lot of P's out there, right? And then you want performance, and you want to be able to really produce for the public the end product. And so we think that AI and all these assistants can help to eliminate some of the productivity performance issues and turn those into high productivity performance issues. Because once you digitize a product, one of the things we tell people, once you digitize a process, you can track it. But if you've got manual paperwork, unless you manually count it and then rely on manually entering that into a spreadsheet, you don't know what's happening. We'll tell agencies, okay, how many phone calls do you get a day for the wait list? Oh, a lot. Okay, well, how many emails do you get from the same person? Well, until you have a CRM that measures all of that, you just don't know. So that's what we mean by those painful P's. Whenever we go somewhere, we know we're going to hear painful P's, and they always deal with paperwork, processes, procedures, and productivity, and people. Not that the people are painful, but it limits us from helping the people productively, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy. I like that. Yeah, it's very cool. I guess kind of ending on, for other organizations that are still hesitant to adapt, paperless processes, what kind of advice would you give them?
If you don't adopt a paperless process, you will be made paperless. And I'll give you an example, okay? The hurricane, we were at an agency that was going back and forth, but, paper, it's been working for us. And, XYZ, who's down in that department, knows where everything is, and they always have. Well, that person retired, and then there was a sprinkler flood, and the documents got ruined, and then there was a hurricane. And now they were paperless and productiveless too. That's not a word, but I just made it up. Okay, until you go with paper, you can't measure what you're doing effectively, and you can't make data-based decisions on how better to provide another P for the people in the community. And so I encourage go paperless wherever you can. There's always going to be an element of paper, but less and less so as the days go by. So, yeah,
I think that's a great sentiment to end on. Productiveless. Don't end up as a productiveless. All the Berkeley
people are going to go productiveless. Did you know what I meant?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now.
Well, thank you so much, Craig. It's amazing to see what you're doing. It's so cool to hear the different uses of AI agents. That's fascinating. Like the ideas that you have for the AI agents and how you're implementing them. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more in the future of how those AI agents have improved people's lives, their paperwork, the one that you gave of potentially helping somebody in a retirement community to be able to check on their parents or their grandparents or whatever. That's just really inspiring stuff. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
We appreciate the opportunity and look forward to developing more success stories with Jotform